Welcome to the Parenting Coach Podcast with Crystal. Over 7 years ago, I felt like I was stuck in this cycle of yelling and reactivity in my parenting that I did not want to be in, but I didn't know how to get out of. I knew how I wanted to parent pretty much exactly, and I'd spent hours reading books, but not finding a way to show up how I wanted to. That's when I started to turn inwards. My own inward journey was what my family needed. As I changed, everything around me changed. My kids' meltdowns decreased by 90% or more with no medications or therapy. I stopped yelling, sibling fighting became almost entirely non-existent, and I found that this change flowed into other areas of my life too. My intuition increased. I started to run my life and business in a very different way. If this sounds like something you want to, I can help. Join me each week as I share my journey, including the laughter, fun, hard times, and tears. Tune in for support, guidance, and fun conversations with my favorite experts, and really anything else that interests me too. I recorded a whole episode for you, and it was good and awesome. And I believe all of the principles that I talked about. And then I went into the most rough weekend with my teens and tweens. And I was pondering on it this weekend, and I just thought so much of what I teach and what I learn is really such a good reminder for me. And these principles really are what I lean back on when those times are really hard. But I wanted to add this little addendum. I guess an addendum is probably at the end, but I wanted this little add-on in the beginning to kind of share with you that my purpose in sharing what I'm going to talk about today in this podcast you're going to hear isn't to show you how great I am or how lovely my family is or that we have no problems and we're just perfect all of the time. But we have really hard times. We have difficult times. We have conflict. We disagree on things. We don't always treat each other kindly. But in all of that, there is a lot of learning and growth. And I wanted to share that with you if you are in a tough time, that as you listen to this podcast, I hope you understand that I also have those same difficult times. And these are the tools that have really helped me work through them. These are the tools that I lean on. And the other little note I wanted to add was if you feel like after listening to this, you're like, but Crystal, I do all these things and this is not working for my teen or tween or whatever child it is, my message for you would just be to hold on, that there has been times where I didn't see any growth. It's like sitting and watching a piece of grass grow. And it felt like, wow, this grass is not growing at all. This change is not happening. It's still just so tough. It's just so difficult. And if you're in those tough, difficult moments with your teen right now, I just want you to know that holding on and staying true to these tools and connection-based stuff that I'm going to be teaching in this podcast will be the best path forward. But I will also mention that it's not a quick fix. It's not something that overnight or even in a week you will notice a change in. But over the weeks, over the months, over the years, you absolutely will. And you will look back on it and recognize how important and how powerful it was to have been parenting in that intentional and connection-based way, even if you couldn't see the growth of the plant in the middle of the journey. So those are just a few little things I wanted to add after I pressed record and finished recording this podcast episode. And I hope you enjoy what I have for you today and not even enjoy it, but just learn something from it. Maybe it's insightful for you. And I hope that it helps you connect with your teen, with your tween, with nieces, nephews, grandkids, whoever it is that you're trying to connect more with. I hope that this message finds you well and that we can spread the message of connection throughout the world. Hello, welcome to today's little podcast chat. Today's going to be a casual conversation between me and you, and we're going to be chatting about how to raise an un-rebellious teen. I first want to explain a little bit about what I'm talking about when I'm talking about rebelliousness. I'm not talking about me swimming upstream or living against the grain or finding ways to do things that haven't necessarily been done before. When I think of that, I think of innovative and creative. When I'm talking about rebelliousness, I'm more talking about the teenage time in which we kind of dread. A lot of times I talk to parents of teens and they're just like, oh, it's so hard. Or when they're younger, they're not looking forward to the teen years. I think we have this belief, this mentality that teens are hard. And remember, our beliefs matter. Podcast episode coming, more about that later. And I've done some in the past also. You can go research that. But beliefs make a big difference. And so if we are believing that our teens are rebellious and that teens are going to be hard, then that is going to be coming to play in our lives also. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that my kids aren't rebellious. And I don't think it's because I've just been like somehow gifted and blessed with these like lovely kids that just like do everything that I say all of the time. I don't think that is what our life is like. I think it's a very normal and natural thing not to say yes to everything. But I do think that for me, my years with my teens have been so positive, that we get along great, that we have really open communication, that we love spending time together, that we talk about really difficult topics pretty openly, and that we, even though we don't see eye to eye on everything all the time, can have really good conversations about it. And I feel like I really do know them and what they're going through in life. I actually asked one of them before this podcast episode, I was like, I want a cool quote for my podcast. And they're like, I don't want you to quote me. So I was like, fine, I won't. But I did ask what they thought rebelliousness kind of was. And they were like, for me, rebelliousness seems more like I'm talking to my parent face to face. I'm telling them that I'm going to do something, knowing like right in that moment, like I'm absolutely never planning on doing that, but I'm just going to like open face lie about it. And I was like, that actually is a pretty good description, because when I think of my teen years, definitely think of rebelliousness. I'll talk about that a little bit. And that feels like it kind of fit the bill. So this is how this idea about this podcast episode kind of came to be. My teenagers were invited to go do something over the holidays, and they didn't want to go because it was kind of late, or we had some sort of conversation about it being late. And they were like, no, too tired. I just want to like come home or whatever. And I was like, no, this is going to be really fun. And your friends are going to be there. Like you can stay up later. It's fine. And I just thought it was funny because I was like, you guys, you're the worst rebellious teens ever. Like you really, you really don't rebel. And in that moment, we all just kind of laughed together. But I was thinking about it later, and I was like, they really don't though. Like there is no rebelliousness. And the thought that came to me was they have nothing to rebel against. And I don't mean that there's no boundaries, because there is, but rebellion happens when you feel a huge amount of control and force. Nobody likes to be forced. Nobody likes to be controlled. It doesn't matter if you're a teenager or if you're 80. Nobody wants to be forced into something that they don't want to do. And when that phrase came to me, like they have nothing to rebel against, that's exactly what I was thinking of. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. I'm going to contrast it with my teen years. I did not listen to my parents. I usually did the opposite of what they said to do, usually exactly the opposite of what they were saying to do, just so I could, just because I was so frustrated at not feeling seen, not feeling heard, feeling life was really unfair in our parent-child relationship. Definitely feeling like I was living my life one way and not really letting them see at all what my real life, what my real thoughts, my real opinions and beliefs were, because I didn't feel like they would be accepted. I knew that it wasn't a safe space for me to share. I knew that I wouldn't be accepted if I shared some beliefs and some opinions and some ways of being that I wanted to be, that it just wouldn't be accepted. So I went and did my own thing. I also think that it led to really low relationship. There wasn't times where I really wanted to spend time with them, and I didn't really want to be at home. I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to be out and about. I wanted to be doing other things. I wanted to pick a school that was far away so I could be somewhere else. Just FYI, we have a great relationship now and things are much better, but it was a very control-based, force-based home, which most parenting was that way in the 80s and the 90s. So if you are listening to this episode and you're raised in that era, it's probably pretty common. I actually think it's still common now. I think that even though we're trying to move out of this, it's like a very slow growth. So like I said, nobody likes to be forced. The rebellion came from me because I was constantly feeling very controlled and very forced, and like I didn't have a safe space to be myself, and that I wouldn't be accepted for who I was. And control and force to me felt like we have decided this is the way that it is. Whether or not you're consenting to this, like this is the way that it is. And you have to live life this way. And if you think about it, even you as an adult now, whoever is listening to this, I want you to think about something that you really don't want to do, or you haven't consented to, or nobody's even asked your opinion on, and they decide for you. They force you into it. You just have to. There's no questioning. There's no asking. There's no conversation. There's no discussion. It's just something that you have to do. And how icky that feels inside, how incongruent that feels inside, like you would rebel. That is something that you would likely rebel against right now. And so the more opportunities you give for control and force, I think the more opportunities we're giving for rebelliousness. If you didn't grow up in a home that was like this and you grew up in a more like passive, permissive type household, this probably wasn't really an issue for you, but this was my lifestyle. For sure. And my home. And I think it is more common than not. I do talk to a few people that had more of the opposite swing, more the apathetic parents, the permissive, and almost like dismissive and non-caring type parents. And that has its own set of stuff. But from what I've seen, the rebelliousness really comes from an energy of force and control. So what I believe now, teens don't have to be rebellious. This doesn't mean that you don't teach boundaries, or that you don't teach at all, or that you don't model anything, or you don't have conversations or discussions with your kids. You are still the guide. You are still there for a reason. But the boundaries that I place in my home are for physical and emotional safety. And there's so few that are really there that they aren't even things that I really have to talk about. When I'm not sitting down and being like, here's the list of all the rules, like don't put your elbows on the table, or like don't chew with your mouth open. Like we don't have an endless list of rules for our kids to rebel against. And every time I think about instilling a boundary, I'm always asking myself, is this a physical or emotional safety issue? And I also have them be a part of the conversation. I teach them, I guide them, we talk, we have a conversation. I'm not just like unilaterally, like we have decided this. There is no discussion. I would say very few times in our parenting relationship that's happened. So boundaries in our home are for physical and emotional safety. Very few are needed. They usually just kind of happen naturally because we trust our kids and because we believe them, because we've cultivated a relationship of trust and belief. Do you remember I've talked about this a couple of times on the podcast about how I believe that kids are like a garden? Like we are here and we get to cultivate the garden, but we don't get to decide what seed is planted or how fast it grows. Like we like to think that we have a lot more control than we really do as gardeners, but we don't. I have just recently collected like maybe 30 or 40 plants in the last few months as we've been finishing up this remodel in our house. And as I've been learning more about plants and I've been taking care of them. There's really not a lot I get to decide. Like sometimes they get aphids and I don't know what to do about it. Or sometimes they start getting yellow and I have to like research like, okay, is there anything I can do about this yellow plant? Or maybe this one needs more sunlight or whatever. But for the most part, I don't get to decide like how fast it grows or how well it grows or like what's happening with its growth. There's like just a few little things that I have influence over. And I think there's a big difference also in our parenting relationships between influence and control. So I like to think of this beautiful garden and just remind myself what actually is mine. What am I responsible for? Where is the me in this part of the relationship and what's them? And am I getting those mixed up a little bit? Am I crossing those communication lines a little bit? Because oftentimes I am. Oftentimes I'm worried that my kid's behavior will come back to me, that it will mean something about me, and that I have to parent them more strictly for this like harsh world that they're in. And I don't think that's true either. There's a quote by Tara Vogler that says, it's time we stop buying the lie that we need to be hard on kids because the world is hard. Love them as hard as you can. That's what they need. And I 100% agree with that. So the difference between influence and control, I actually think that as our force goes down, our influence goes up at the same level. So the more that you can decrease the control and the force, the more the influence will naturally go up. Influence being they actually want to be around you. They care to have a relationship with you. They care about what you care about. They look up to you as a model for behavior. They want advice from you. That is the kind of relationship that I want. And I don't want a relationship just for the first 20 years of my kid's life. I don't want a relationship for the first 18 years of their life, and then for them just to peace out and be like, I'm going to go do my own thing because I don't want to be controlled anymore. I want a relationship with them for 50 years, for 70 years, for 90 years. Okay. So I was asked recently by someone who was like, hey, what about this teen situation? Like they're in a pretty difficult situation. They've been like stealing, they're doing drugs, they're secretly sneaking in people or sneaking out of their house or whatever. And they were like, that's pretty extreme. Like, obviously, like, this is something that needs to be dealt with. And I think that for one, before it even got to that point, I would be looking at things like open communication. What am I teaching them? What support do they need? Am I encouraging them? Like, what is happening? But once it got to that point, I wouldn't be looking at like, okay, I need to control and I need to force to get rid of the situation. I would be looking at what's happening for them, what's happening in their little minds, what's happening behind the scenes, because I've always believed that behavior is communication. They're communicating something with us, and there is a reason that they are acting this way. In fact, I will share a quote that I was just reading by Dr. Abe Lon, and he was being interviewed on Mel Robbins' podcast. And he said that kids do well if they can. This is a mantra I've heard all over the place in parenting, but kids do well if they can. And he expanded on that and said, 50 years of research shows us that it's not a lack of motivation. It's not like the kids, they're struggling behaviorally, not because they want to, not because they're choosing to, not because they're just not motivated. It's because they have a lack of skills to behave well. They don't lack the will to behave well. They lack the skills to behave well. And I think that's a really interesting difference. So if my child was going through something really difficult, I wouldn't be going to what consequences can I instill here? What rewards, or how can I bribe them? How can I use control and force, right? Other words, how can I use control and force? I would be looking at what's happening behind the scenes, what's happening for them. How can I encourage them? How can I support them? How can I figure out what skills they lack? And how can I help them through this? And it's a very different situation. It's a very different way to look at that. I have done this also with my kids as we've been looking at things like they've gone through some difficulties, and where I'm kind of like, okay, what are we going to do about this together? What's actually happening here? How can I help and support you through this? And let them be on the same side with me. One of these examples I would say is screens, when I've been trying to teach them, healthy use of screens, and also how much time and like what times of day and whatever. I have it be part of the not daily conversation, but part of a regular conversation that we have. So they get to notice, like, how does it make your brain feel? How does it make your body feel if you spend, 4 hours in a row on YouTube? What do you think about this? And I read them books. I cite studies. I'll talk to them. We'll have discussions about it. But it's not a lecture. It's not me telling them. And I take their input. So even if in the past this has happened where my kids say, well, I want this many hours. And I'm like, okay, let's try that. And they do. And we come back and have a conversation again. And I have them tell me, like, how did that go? How did you feel? What was going? And I really do it in a way that's very open, not like, see, I told you so, because that's still the control and force. But I'm helping them uncover how they really feel and what kind of boundaries they want to make for themselves. And I'm believing them, and I'm trusting them that they actually know a lot more than I think that they do. Another situation in which I remember this happening was my kiddo was struggling in school with home education and doing school online and also in person. And I think my old me would have just been really frustrated. I would have been like, okay, this and this and this and this is what we're doing. Like, I'm putting a plan into place. It would have been very control and force. And that is not how I did it this time. I kind of looked behind the scenes. I zoomed out and I looked at what do I think is happening in this kiddo's brain? And the thought that came to me was, often we tie our self-worth to productivity. And so they were not being super productive. And so they were actually feeling shame and self-worth issues. And as soon as that came to me, I'm like, oh, this is a shame problem. This is not a school problem. And I tackled it from a completely different angle because I recognized that it wasn't a shame problem. If I had gone in there and used force and control and frustration and anger, I would have increased the shame. I would have added to the situation that would have made it worse over time, instead of going in the angle of oh, this just child actually needs more love, more compassion, more support, more encouragement. Those are the things that are going to bust the shame. Anyways, so there's a little personal example. So what do we do in order to kind of rebellious proof our kids as we're aging? And also, it's never too late to work on this. Number one would be connection and relationship. If we want to fix a relationship, if we want to increase more connection, our thoughts matter. Our thoughts that we have about our kids, what we believe is possible about them, the energy we bring into that relationship. They can feel the energy that we have. We also have to work on our own stuff. So many times I coach people about their teens, and they're being triggered by their teens because their own inner child that's a teen is also being triggered. In fact, this one experience I was having with a client, when she kind of dug into what was happening under the surface for her, it was like autonomy versus control. And it brought her right back to her own teenagehood, where she never never felt autonomous, where she felt constantly controlled. And she knew that what she really wanted was freedom. And in that moment, she realized this is actually an inner problem here. It doesn't have anything to do with my kids. And what my kids want is more freedom. And as I can feel more freedom, I can give that to them too. So our inner work is actually very connected to all of this. Another one would be prioritizing relationships. Like, what do I actually think is important? Do I spend the time, the energy, the effort on this? And could somebody from the outside looking in be like, yes, that's obviously your priority because of how you treat it, or not? If you feel it's too late, my teens are already here, they're already rebellious, what do I do? I just don't believe that it's ever too late. I would start with this, just this. I would start with your own inner work. What is triggering you and why, and what's behind the scenes, and how can we dig through that? Because as you do that, your relationship with them will improve so much. And again, as the control can lessen, the influence will increase, and the influence that you want to have will come. One of the things that I like to think about is just like what's going on in their brain, what's going on behind the scenes for them in a non-judgmental way, almost like a scientist or doing an experiment. Like, what do I think is actually happening here? I truly believe that we need to trust our kids more, that we need to believe in them more, and we also need to believe them more. Believe your kids, believe in them, trust that they're on their own unique path that they need to be on. Trust that they know themselves, that they have their own answers. And you can consciously think that, but if you can kind of feel like there's an energetic block there, like you can't all the way feel that, you can actually ask yourself, like, what do I actually think about this? How did my parents model this? What might be stuck for me here? Because what I noticed is that I had this incongruence of thought. Like, consciously, I believed all the things that I've been telling you on this podcast, but unconsciously, I would be really triggered by my kids. And when I would uncover the trigger, it would be from these old beliefs. Like, respect your elders, and respecting means don't question. Older people have more experience. They're not to be questioned. You're supposed to just listen to them and then like do whatever they've asked. And in the same vein, that means don't listen to yourself, right? Don't listen to you. You don't know. You're too young. You're too inexperienced. You can't have answers. And that belief has stuck with me. As I aged, I still had the belief that I couldn't trust myself, that I had to listen to other people's answers, that other people knew the answers that I didn't. That has taken me years to move through that subconscious block so that there was congruence between what I was believing consciously and what I was believing subconsciously. And this idea, I love to think about a world where we believe our kids, where we trust our kids, where we respect our kids in the way that we wanted to respect elders. We actually respect our kids. We let them question. We let them talk to us about things. We let them wonder. We let them not immediately just answer and respond and do our bidding. We only really want that anyways, because we want life to be easier for us. We want to feel less friction in our own world. So I think that it can be a really beautiful space when we move into just truly trusting our kids. And I have had the joy of being able to get along with lots of teens that are friends of our teens, and just the kind of conversations that I hear them have. I just want them to be more open with their parents. I can tell that there's things that they don't feel safe or feel comfortable having conversations with the adults in their life. And not things that are like, crazy or unsafe, but definitely things that are big life choices, future, career, university, what to do after high school, things like that. And I just think I wish that kids were able to have these open and honest conversations with their parents and feel accepted and feel not judged. And I know that that comes from cultivating connection, cultivating relationship, moving into a space of non-judgment, dropping that control and that force, and really allowing ourselves to connect. And we do have to do our own shame work here, because if I am tying my own self-worth to external validation within my parenting, then I'm going to need my kids to fulfill my unfulfilled dreams. I'm going to need my kids to do good, whatever good looks like, so that I can feel like I did a good job. And that's going to muck up all of the things happening within my parenting and my relationship. So we really want to disconnect those things. The moral of the story is, the most powerful work that you can do is your own inner work. Also, that's the only work you can really do. You can't change other people. You can't jump in and do their work. You can only do your work. You can get a shovel. You can dig around, prune around your own garden and realize like, what is in here? Where are the weeds here? And as you do that, as you decrease that control and that force, I promise you, your influence will increase at this like 100-fold. It will increase at the same level, maybe even more. And you can let that influence seep through to your lovely kiddos. You can listen to, I did 2 podcast episodes on breathing belief into your kids. And that our influence in the beliefs that we're able to breathe into our kids are so much more when the control and the force is gone. And in the future, looking back on it, you're going to be so glad that you prioritized your relationship with them over all the little things, over getting them to, do whatever feels important in that moment. I often ask myself, like, what matters most? Like I say that to me to help really reorient what matters to me and what do I want in this moment. And it's always relationship. It always goes back to how can I preserve the relationship at all costs? Because that really is the thing that matters most. And I truly believe is that you cultivate this relationship and connection with your children, with your teens, no matter the age, no matter where they are right now, that your relationship will change. You will see it change before your eyes. And that work in order to cultivate and change it comes from within. So there's my little message for you today. For anyone who's listening and is interested in coaching with me this year, if you feel the pull, I'm here. I have 3 spots left for one-on-one coaching, and it's a holistic approach. So yes, we're going to be going over relationships, but so much more. And not only are we going to go over relationships, parent, child, partner relationships, all of the things, so that we can really get you to a space where you're feeling very aligned in those areas. We're also going to be working on a holistic approach: mind, body, spirit, relationships, creation, like goals and business, life, experiences. It's actually all the same work. It's all this unshaming work. It's all this non-attachment work that I've been talking about. If you want to listen to more of that, you can listen to the Miracle Year from last season's episode. I love you. Thank you for being here for 10 whole seasons. I don't know what the future holds for this little podcast after this season. I am in a space of major transition, and I have not yet decided what I'm going to do with all the little moving parts like this as I'm making these professional pivots. But I do know that I have loved being here. I've loved sharing with you. I have loved I hope you have also loved it. I hope you've gotten something from it as well. And I've loved having this space to be able to share my thoughts, share my opinions and ideas. And I hope more than just my opinions, ideas, I hope I share my energy. I hope that you can feel my energy through this podcast episode and all the other ones. And I hope that the energy helps bring about more positive energy in the world, because that really is the goal. The goal has nothing to do with me and how awesome I am or growing my business or my own personal goals. It has to do with, am I putting out more positive energy into the world, and I am helping promote and create change? And I think we can all do that in our sphere. I will end with one little thought that I thought as I was prepping for this podcast. And it's this: you will never regret loving them more. You'll never regret it. That is one thing I know, looking back on my life, that I will never say, wow, I just loved them too much. So if you're feeling like, where do I start? Start there. How can you love them more? How can you love you more? How can you love them more? And that is how we can spread more love, more positivity into the world through our kids. It starts in our home. It starts with us. Thanks for being here, and we will see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, I would love for you to help spread the word by getting this message of support and guidance out to as many people as possible. So text it to your best friend or tag me on Instagram and share it. Leave a review, rate it, subscribe it, or follow on your favorite platform. Send me a DM on IG letting me know which parts have impacted you or what you'd like to see on future episodes. We'll see you next week.